It's over 100 days into Donald Trump's second term, and he's yet to issue a specific policy for Africa. But his foreign policies have frozen aid, gutted the U.S. humanitarian agency, and caused tariff chaos across the globe. The African Development Bank says all but 7 African countries have been hit by higher U.S. tariffs. Trump argues America has long been taken advantage of, so he hopes to strike deals that will benefit the U.S. during the 90-day pause on his reciprocal tariff program. Some of the hardest hit nations on the continent include South Africa, hit with levies of 30% on U.S. imports, Botswana, which is facing 37% tariffs, while Mauritius is looking at 40%. There's 47% for Madagascar. The hardest hit is Lesotho with 50%. Tuso Kumalo finds out how people in Maseru are reacting.
U.S. President Donald Trump may think that Africa's Lesotho is a country no one has even heard of. However, when an American buys jeans, chances are that it was made in Lesotho. The U.S. is threatening to slap 50% tariffs on the Mountain Kingdom to try and make up a $234 million trade deficit, according to the latest American trade data. And that could silence the sound of these garment grinding machines.
I am frustrated, scared that I might lose my job.
Karabelo is part of an estimated 12,000 textile industry workforce.
It's not only the people working in the textiles that are affected. There's people the ones that are not staying in the close proximity to the factories, they take taxis to work. The taxi industry will also directly be impacted.
The government says textile factories supplying goods under the African Growth Opportunity Act, AGOA, make up 42% of the textile industry. 31-year-old Ntsepeng Lenko is already job hunting after she left a company that failed to pay her for 3 months.
My message to Trump would be that I would like him to please consider the 50% tariff. It's not going to be a good look, especially in terms of the fact that the country is already suffering.
However, some experts believe Lesotho does not benefit from the textile industry. That's because most of the garment factories are owned by Chinese and Taiwanese companies.
None of the profits that the Chinese were making in the United States actually found their way to Lesotho. They basically came here to pay rent or pay for electricity or salaries and pay for water, and then the rest of it goes to Taiwan and other places.
Lesotho also exports trout and rough diamonds to the U.S., and the government says it is already engaging the U.S. to keep what will be crippling tariffs at bay. With nearly 40% of Lesotho's youth already unemployed, the government says these tariffs could be a death blow if implemented. Analysts argue the country can either push the U.S. to drop the tariffs or diversify its exports to other markets. Tuso Kumalo, Africa Matters, Maseru, Lesotho.
So some countries are already negotiating business and security deals with the U.S., like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the world's largest cobalt producer. It's hoping that the Minerals for Security Agreement will unlock U.S.-backed investment in energy and mining in exchange for help fighting the M23 rebels. Rwanda is separately pursuing a potential deal with Washington that would grant access to its mineral resources, particularly tantalum, used for motor components such as capacitors.
This initiative brings accountability and draws the hard lessons from past efforts that have failed to materialize. So the good news is there is hope for peace.
In addition, and very importantly, we are discussing how to build new regional economic value chains that link our countries, including with American private sector investment.
And some of those minerals could be supplied to the U.S. using the Lobito Corridor, a network of 2,600 kilometers of rail and road linking the DRC and Zambia to Angola's Atlantic coast. The U.S. envoy to Angola says Washington remains committed to its $553 million project launched by former President Joe Biden. But there's been a delay in funds disbursement, which the U.S. blames on extensive bureaucracy and not a disagreement.
Your administration will invest over $6 billion to the Angolan Lobito Corridor that will basically transport minerals, critical minerals from Congo, Angola, and many other countries.
We're looking to do some nice things and keep it peaceful. We're going to keep it peaceful.
But there's been tension between the U.S. and Africa's most developed economy. Soon after taking office, Trump quickly singled out South Africa for sanctions and aid cuts over its land expropriation law. Washington expelled its ambassador and threatened 30% tariffs. Pretoria says it hopes to mend ties, leverage on the African Continental Free Trade Area to bolster intra-African trade, as well as forge global alliances. But China still commands a strong presence in Africa. It's sub-Saharan Africa's largest trading partner and in fact dominates the DRC's mining industry. Africa is a key part of Beijing's Belt and Road Infrastructure or BRI projects. China is warning African countries against striking trade deals with the US at Beijing's expense.
It should be pointed out in particular that China firmly opposes any party reaching a deal at the expense of China's interests. If this happens, China will never accept it and will resolutely take countermeasures in a reciprocal manner.
Now, seemingly under threat are U.S.-Africa security ties. Reports suggest that Trump intends to downsize the number of U.S. troops on the continent and move AFRICOM to a sub-command position under European command. But this has not been made public. However, the U.S. Defense Secretary has warned that African partners must take the lead on their own security. Let's hear more from Professor Christopher Isike. He's the director of the African Association of Political Science and director of the African Center for the Study of the United States, University of Pretoria. He joins me from Pretoria, South Africa. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. Straight on, Trump has made it very clear that he'll pursue an American first policy. So the question, Prof, is how should African countries position themselves to their strategic advantage?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. A simple answer would be for Africa to get its house in order and adopt a collective approach to engaging with the United States, because what Trump prefers is a state-to-state bilateral approach, which will benefit big countries, but not so much small countries. So a collective approach would be something that Africa should look to put in place.
Right, but then are African countries doing enough to counter the shift in the U.S. foreign policy? And we could talk about the role of the African Union in all of this.
Absolutely, they are not doing enough at all. Our approach has always been reactive. We've never been proactive. For example, there's no country in the continent that has a specific country U.S. policy. Neither do we have an Africa-wide U.S. strategy. We always respond to U.S.-Africa strategies. So we need to be better prepared, more proactive. And one of the ways we can do this is to fund centers within the continent that can gather, information about the U.S. to produce knowledge that can enable knowledge-driven engagements between Africa and the United States.
The African Union, Prof. I mean, what is their role? What is its role in all of this?
Well, remember, the African Union oftentimes is only as potent as the heads of states, as the president of the countries. So in that regard, it's not really very potent, but the African Union presents a pedestal, a platform for us to be able to enact that collective agency that I'm talking about. But the leaders, the heads of states, the presidents need to have the political will to use the African Union as that pedestal, and they've not been able to do so as yet.
Prof, you said something really interesting, and I want to pick up from that, because you talked about specific policies for countries with the U.S. and not the U.S.-Africa policies like we hear all the time. I mean, what are our leaders on the continent not doing? What are they not getting right? Why is it still U.S.-Africa policy?
Well, I was at a forum yesterday and I asked if we don't have common sense. We all seem to know what we need to do, what we're supposed to do, but we simply have not been able to do it. So it's a question of, like you asked, why? And I think that is because of the perverse state systems that we have in the continent. We don't yet have that sense of identity, sense of purpose that comes from identity in terms of why our states exist, and whether how we should repurpose them to serve our interests. Once we have those in place, it will become commonplace for us to begin to articulate what our interests are, and it will see very soon that we are better off, having a common agency to engage with superpowers, not just like the US, but including China and Russia.
Indeed, and you mentioned China. So let's go to China now, because it has warned countries against striking deals with the US at Beijing's expense. So how much of a threat is that to African economies, seeing that China is sub-Saharan Africa's largest trading partner? And so what should Africa do about it? What should the continent do about it?
Well, we have no choice now but to enact some agency. Otherwise, we'll become pawns in the emerging new world order that we're seeing, pawns for either the US or China to push around based on their interests. And like we said, we've not articulated a common identity, and from there, common interests that can then, develop a common purpose for how we engage with these people. So once we do those, put our house in order and get those in place, and we become consistent in applying this principle, there's pretty little either China or the US can do to us once they see that we're principled and consistent in applying our principles to our foreign policy actions.
Put our house in order, you said, Prof. Let's go back to the US. So is it losing its soft power on the continent with the foreign aid cuts, and what's the implication going forward?
Well, it's not just Africa that the US today is losing its soft power, ability to. It is everywhere in the world, in the way that Mr. Trump has pursued his foreign policy. And I think that it comes from his fundamental failure to understand that American leadership of the world, American power, as he likes to believe, is not really only from its military prowess or its economic capabilities. In fact, after the end of the Second World War and then the Cold War, what made America remain world leaders are the innovations around soft power issues like democracy, human rights, that it advanced, research and innovation. Today, the United States is making it more difficult for foreign students from all over the world to go to the United States to do research in the so-called free bastion of the world, and forgetting that that's a big measure of its soft power. So it's not just Africa that America is losing this soft power advantage to, but everywhere else in the world. And I dare say one of the things that America has over China in Africa is exactly that soft power, and especially through its diaspora, which we do not have in China the way we have it established in America. So once the US loses sight of that, it is again losing an advantage, a strategic advantage to its competitor, China.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Christopher Isike, there for your time and contribution. Still to come here on Africa Matters.
I'm Victoria Amunga here in Kenya to show you how one aid group is helping malnourished children in the slums.
Well, it's been just over 3 months since the Trump administration froze all foreign aid pending internal reviews. And the impact has been felt in countries like Sudan, where the United Nations is warning that the maternal health system is on the brink, as funding cuts and displacement leave millions of women without critical care. Christina Simic has more.
Sudan's healthcare professionals are sounding the alarm over a silent emergency. It's been 100 days since US President Donald Trump cut foreign aid. And it has left doctors and midwives on the ground grappling with how they can treat pregnant women in conflict zones.
We examine pregnant women, guide them, and do monthly follow-ups. The hardest case I faced was when a woman delivering in a car had complications. But there was no way to get to the hospital. We were stuck in the car.
Doctors Without Borders CEO Avril Benoit says the funding cuts is a human-made disaster for millions of people struggling to survive war and emergencies. adding that her team of doctors in more than 20 countries around the world have reported disrupted or suspended reproductive health programs, which relies on referrals for medical emergencies and supplies in areas that are already facing high levels of maternal and infant mortality rates.
I've cried many times, especially when women can't reach us to get the care they need.
In January, the UN estimated that around 2.7 million women of reproductive age are displaced in Sudan. Of those, more than 270,000 are pregnant, and around 91,000 were expected to give birth over the past 3 months, and may have no choice but to deliver their child in the open without trained doctors or proper medicine. The UN Refugee Agency says some who have managed to flee across borders into Egypt are being forced to wait for treatment too.
In Egypt, this has become very noticeable with the Sudan crisis, where basically the allocated funds are the same, while the refugee population has more than tripled.
As vital medical resources begin to dwindle in Sudan, it seems lives are no longer just at risk from bullets or famine. Now doctors and midwives face an impossible choice: to help or to turn patients away, highlighting that urgent funding needs to be restored or found elsewhere. Christina Simic, Africa Matters.
To Kenya now, where the government says that over 800,000 children in the country are severely malnourished. But an aid organization has come up with a low-tech but highly effective way to help thousands of children living in the slums. The group uses local food and nutritional advice to boost the weight and overall health of youngsters. Victoria Amunga caught up with them in the capital, Nairobi.
Nutritionist Esther Opana attends to dozens of children in Kenya's Kibra slum. Opana assesses whether the little ones have put on weight.
We have classification, so that will tell if the baby's weight for age is underweight or severe underweight, or the child is stunted. So from there, if the child is found to be underweight, we have to sit the mother down and have a discussion.
Child malnutrition is common in this slum, Opana says, because many parents can't afford to feed their youngsters properly. So her organization is training mothers and caregivers to create healthy meals for less than $1 using low-cost ingredients available from local markets.
How old are you?
Faustine Akinye has 3 children, and when her family lost their only source of income in 2020, her second child began to suffer malnutrition.
My son was very weak. Yeah. He was weak, he was diarrheaing, things of that kind. So when I talked to the health workers, they came for my rescue.
To help combat malnutrition, Kenya has begun producing fortified foods, including edible oils, by adding minerals like vitamins, which officials say are key to feeding children.
We are talking about rice, maize, wheat, sorghum, and some beans. So these are what we call the critical cereal crops the country is consuming. So we are talking about 90% is what the country is consuming.
A major international charity, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, or GAIN, says enhancing nutritional content is crucial in ensuring the public have access to healthy food.
We don't want to waste time until a child is malnourished to come and intervene. We started looking at post-production. How is this food stored? How is this food transported? How is this food? How is value added to this food?
Officials say that Kenya has made significant progress in reducing stunted growth among children, but many are still at risk. At least 45% of all under 5 deaths of children in Kenya are associated with malnutrition. Although thousands of these kids are in dire need of help, only 20% receive assistance. But with programs such as this, infants in the slums have hope to survive. Victoria Amunga, Africa Matters, Nairobi, Kenya.
In Uganda, wetlands that once sustained livelihoods have been drying up due to population growth. Now, farmers and local leaders are working to reverse the damage and restore a fragile ecosystem, as Ilias Avji reports.
Uganda is home to more than 8,000 wetlands according to government data. And they're vital for farming, wildlife, and protecting communities from the effects of climate change. But in places like Masindi, much of that natural protection has been lost. Locals say once thriving wetlands and forests have been degraded by farming, burning, and expansion.
We had very beautiful forests, very beautiful wetlands, but because of several pressures, these areas were all degraded. By the time I grew up, at least I saw there was already cane, but the swamps were intact, the rivers were intact.
The damage has come at a cost. Water catchment areas have dried up. Wildlife has disappeared.
Because of desire to increase economically to get some money, I ended up cutting down the forest. So for example, wildlife, there were chimpanzees, there were monkeys, calabash monkeys, all of them had to migrate because of that change.
In response, local communities backed by local companies and government agencies have launched massive reforestation efforts, planting over 400,000 trees across Masindi. Access to clean water has improved and wildlife is slowly returning.
The community will not get the benefits it wants from the ecosystem if the wetlands are destroyed. So it was a meeting point between the company and the community to say conservation of these wetlands is for the good of us all.
The Ugandan government gazetted all wetlands in the country in 2023. Still, challenges remain. Officials say enforcement of environmental laws requires more coordination and stronger action.
We are trying our level best to ensure that we improve compliance. But compliance is not only the responsibility of the ministry. It involves different stakeholders. It involves a lot of stakeholders to ensure that this compliance is enforced.
With restoration efforts underway, locals believe the wetlands and their way of living can still be saved. Ilyas Avcı, Africa Matters.
We head to the streets of Goma in the Democratic Republic of the Congo now, where a group of kids are becoming increasingly popular. What they all have in common is a love for dance. Some have been orphaned by the conflict there. Others live on the streets or they come from difficult family situations. Zanem Neti Zaidi has the details.
Since 2017, Invisible Kids Academy has been changing lives through the arts of dance. Today, they're off to cheer people up at a popular market in the city of Goma.
I saw how the children dance. They dance very well. Their performance proves that they are well supervised, they are well educated and very polite. It's really encouraging to see.
Invisible Kids Academy has more than 20 children.
When we wake up, we don't want to see our enclosure dirty, so we do our best to tidy up everything in the house and outside to fight clutter. And that's something we do with all the kids. The aim is to teach children to take responsibility for themselves so that they can do their own work even if we are not there.
Dancing is a way for these children to relax, forget the difficulties they've been through, and look to the future with hope. Bush Sebar, the founder of this center, would like to take on many more children, but his means are limited.
If we can teach them when they have needs that we are not able to take care of. So all these things, all these needs are the difficulty that we meet, because if the children or the kids want to dance good, want to learn arts good, is when the care is already done, when they have everything they need so that they can dance.
There are thousands of street children here in Goma. Too many children are in conflict with their families, suffering on the street because they can't find enough to eat and sleep under the stars. But the children living in this center say they've found a new life.
I feel really good when I live with the other kids here.
The company of the other kids, this stresses me, and I forget everything I've been through in my life.
On their various social media platforms, Invisible Kids Academy's dance videos rack up thousands of views and positive comments. They also perform on different stages in Goma, where they have won numerous song and dance competitions. Zanemneti Zaidi, Africa Matters, Goma, DRC.
That's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you've seen on this episode, or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Grace Kuria Kanja.